Welcome. This is the morning meeting, and I'm Mark Halperin, and we couldn't be happier to have you here. Sean, Dan, and I are going to walk you through the day with peace, love, and understanding, the presumption of grace for all. If you want to be in the conversation, raise your yellow hand. If you're here on the two-way platform, if you're on X or YouTube, don't raise your hand. Your friends and family and work colleagues might think you're a little cuckoo, but you can write in the chat. But if you do write in the chat, don't write smack in the chat. That goes for
Oh, we
everybody.
need t-shirts. That's a good, no
Everybody.
smack in the chat.
No
I'm
smack in the
branding that.
chat. Okay, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll run through the day, gentlemen. Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Oh,
You know
great,
what?
thanks.
I've got a spring in my step today.
Yeah,
So many great issues. I'm just going to
yeah.
stop.
Sean, when
On the balls
we're,
are on the tee. Just
we're going
just
to talk.
just loosen up.
We are going to talk about the media a bit. But Sean, when you were White House press secretary, were any of these kinds of changes ever pondered?
Yes. I
Yes.
mean, we did a lot of, yeah, I mean, I'll go into it, but I'd rather talk about all the glorious things that Caroline actually did versus what
Okay.
we,
All right. I just like to excavate a little bit. All
yeah,
right.
no.
The president today, cabinet meeting at 11. First cabinet meeting. Lots we'll talk about that, but super interested in that. And then more executive orders at 3, currently listed at closed press. Again, if you're going to Ladbrokes, you're putting down a fiver. Bet there'll be some coverage of that event. So those are his two events today. Don't know what the vice president's doing today, but the Vermont press reports he's going skiing in Vermont this weekend with
Ooh.
his family. So we'll talk more about that as the week goes on. House and Senate are in, various hearings, confirmation process continues for the head of the U.S. Trade Office, and some other stuff in the afterglow, which we'll talk about in a moment, of the House passage of the reconciliation blueprint. All right. On the reconciliation, some of us have seen this movie before. If you're president, a new president in particular, you've got a vote where the margin of error is nil. You say to them, this is the first vote. Just give me this first vote. Don't stop the process. Move it along. There'll be time to change things. And then when you get to the next vote, you say, we already did the first vote. This is the home stretch. My presidency's on the line. Don't stand in the way. And many members of the House, Republicans, are already citing the dynamic that we've talked about here, which is in some ways you're better off with a 1 seat or 2 seat margin than 10 or 14 because there's no margin of error and everybody has to just get in line. Where we are now, great triumph for the speaker. Lots of the news accounts say the predictable thing, which is this is just the first step. It gets harder from here. I'm not sure that's true, but in any event, Sean, what happens now? Because we still have the Senate's got two bill path, or House has one bill path, and of course you can bring up the mythical notion of a conference committee, but they do have to work this out. So how will this be worked out now between the House and Senate to go forward?
So the first thing I want to say is I know we always like to look forward, but I want to look back. Everything that the three of us said about the budget was right. They did tell them to leave town. So whoever said that is right. They left town. They came back. It was you had Burchett was the guy after Sparks folded. I just got a kick out of we bring insight every day in unique ways. And it was like every one of us was right because that's how it all unfolded in so many. It was unbelievably. They leave town,
And we
they
all
come back.
said
They hold the vote
to get on the
open.
phone. Yep.
Right.
Yes.
But it was, think about
Yes.
this. They left town. They held the vote. They did the 3 that we want. They got Burchett to fold. The president got on the phone. I mean, it was like everything.
History not record probably how this program yesterday foretold what would happen with a level of precision not seen anywhere else. And I say members who go from hell no to hell yes are the salvation of Speaker Johnson.
So just in case that we tried to do a morning meeting 5 bullet point list, I see a couple people. I'm going to put that on one of my things I did this week. Predict budget. So if we have the Elon Musk of the morning meeting, I just know I've got a couple of bullet points. I've got a couple more if I could get 24 more hours. I think this is a normal, everything that we've talked about, again, will continue to unfold. The Senate will pass their bill. They will go to it will be called a conference. They will, this is the funny thing to me is that for as hard as it was to roll those guys in the first place, it goes downhill for the conservatives from there. The Senate will not have as much spending cuts, will not push as much. I will say this, and I've reiterated it, where the cutesy part of this comes in is there's these magical budgetary terms that you can use, current policy versus current law, and it will all affect how the bill is scored, how much tax policy you can include, how reconciliation number. My guess is that at this point, everybody's on the same page in that they want to get, all of the goodies in it, and it'll become more of a selling project. You saw Mike Lawler get pushed by a lot of members yesterday about, Medicare cuts. Again, this is what we talked about on the show. They're using the framework of fraud. So I actually feel like they're in a good place right now. It's each iteration gets a little harder because it gets a little watered down, and it'll become a little bit more very Washington-esque, where they try to finesse how they're selling the tax cuts, how many they can include, what the deficit reduction number is, et cetera. So this is going to be a cutesy game from here. But I think we're just going to plow through, and in a month from now, you'll have a budget resolution.
All correct and very smart. Before Dan speaks, though, are we going on one bill or two?
One.
Yep. Okay. Dan.
Yeah, I think it'll be one. Look, I think the two most important questions now, as they go to fill in the blanks, is how much are they going to try to cut in taxes? Because the House had $4.5 trillion, and that's about what it will cost to reauthorize all of the 2017.
But none of the president's other campaign promises.
Correct. And right. So if he's going to do taxes on tips and overtime and Social Security, you're looking at closer to 6 or 7 trillion. On the other end,
and to that point, just real quick, we talked about this months ago on a different subject. How the parliamentarian rules in the Senate is going to be the most inside baseball yet important decision that is made.
Everyone look up the Byrd rule, and we can do a little tutorial on that. The other thing is, how much do you cut? Because the way they basically got everyone on board in the House was they told the moderates, don't worry about the spending cuts, particularly Medicaid. We're going to, call it waste, fraud, and abuse, but it won't be as much as the hardliners are saying. And they told the hardliners, we're really going to do, what you want. So now you got to kind of fill it in. And on those spending cuts, it really looks like it is going to come down to, at one point they said 2.5 trillion. Then they lowered it to 1.5 trillion. I'm now hearing $1 trillion is the magic number because it sounds better. Less than that is kind of optically a problem, but it's about Medicaid. And Politico says today Trump is nervous about it and has told people, like, don't worry, we're not going to really touch Medicaid. I know they're talking about waste, fraud, and abuse, but based on what we've seen with Doge, so much of what they say in reality, and the reality is the Trump administration publishing the actual statistics, is nowhere near the numbers that they put out in the press. So I think, you have tax cuts, they want to go this way, spending they want to bring down. And when you talk about debt and deficit, you may be adding 5 trillion.
Yep. Two questions for you guys. Sean, will this one beautiful bill have this massive increase in the debt ceiling in it? Is that something that will stay in the bill?
I think it has to.
Yeah, I agree.
It's the only vehicle. By the way, the two things that are important to understand about President Trump, he hates to see death and destruction, especially when it comes to women and children. That it has a huge impact on him. And the second is he really has been consistent on not touching entitlement programs. And even this notion of waste, fraud, and abuse, I think, is the way of the staff trying to get him into this. But he has an aversion to talking to cuts in Social Security and Medicaid. That's a core belief of him. He really doesn't like touching them. And so this is actually more of a sell of the staff to him than him to the members. Like, you heard some of the chatter that he was telling members, don't worry, we're not going to touch this. The staff's trying to tell him, in order to get to this number, we have to go hunting where there's, there's real dollars.
Yeah.
And that's in these programs. And we'll do it through waste, fraud, and abuse, efficiencies, reforms. But at the same time, he is very, I think, sensitive to this in the same way.
Even though he's not facing the voters again?
That's why I'm saying there's certain, when you talk about Trump, if you look consistently, tariffs and trade, immigration, not touching Social Security, and
that's all when he was trying to get elected president.
Well,
that's why I'm saying that they're core beliefs of his. Like he really, like, those are the touchstones to understanding really where his red lines are.
But I think his core thing is he doesn't like to kind of like harm people. He doesn't like to deliver like the tough love, so to speak, when it comes to something that may hurt his people, his base. He's just never shown that he wants to, that he's willing to go there ever.
I find your shared idealism about Donald Trump's beliefs in protecting people to be heartwarming, but does
I
not
don't think it's
accord
protecting people. He just wants those popularity numbers high.
well, but he's
all he
not
cares
facing the
about.
voters yet. All right, Dan, real quick, because I want to move to a different topic. Do you agree the debt ceiling increase will be in this package?
It has to be. They
Yeah.
just simply don't have the votes.
Okay. Here's my last question, Dan, first. What's the forcing mechanism? If it's one big bill, then the tax cuts don't expire to the end of the year. So when do they bring this to a vote, presumably in the Senate first and then in the House? What's the timing of that? I mean, there's a lot of intermediate steps, but final passage, could it be before December? And if so, what's the forcing mechanism?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So what's the forcing mechanism?
I think patience. I think he just gets pissed that it's taking so long to put points on the board.
And just demands the vote.
Yeah.
We never see bills like this pass without a forcing mechanism, but maybe
I think the forcing mechanism is his numbers on the economy are going south. And I think, to Sean's point, he is going to get antsy because the prices of eggs, and I mean, you look at every poll, even the most friendly poll for Trump, where people have a good view of him on Action and all this stuff, it always says concerns about inflation, frustration about the economy. So I think there's 2 dates. I think they try to get it done before the summer recess. I don't think that's going to happen. And if they whiff by the summer recess, you then open members up to going home and potentially getting an earful. So I think the goal is by the end of July. The reality is probably around Thanksgiving.
The answer we were looking for was the August recess. The August recess. That's the answer we were looking for. All right. Dan, where will Elon Musk sit at the cabinet meeting, and will he be called on to speak?
And I want to add one other thing, Mark. Does he attend the State of the Union, and where does he sit? I think
I don't think so.
He's not on the dais next to Vance.
No.
And,
all right.
I'm joking.
Where does he sit today, and does he get called on to speak?
He sits at the round table. I think he sits.
How many seats away next to the president?
Next to the president. And I think the most fascinating thing is someone in the press is going to ask, like, why is he there if he doesn't run Doge? And they're going to ask him. I think they will also ask about, because there will be a couple of cabinet members who explicitly ignored and instructed their staff not to follow his EO. Somebody's going to ask.
Will Trump call on him to speak?
Yes.
How? What rank order? In other words, besides Trump, who will speak next? Where will he be called on next?
Assuming JD Vance is there, Trump, Vance, Musk.
Sean, same questions. Where does he sit? When is he called on, if called on?
I think he sits in either two places, either at the round table or directly behind Trump. So he will sit at the staff table behind him, right there over his shoulder, or a couple down from him. But there is an order of precedent. And I know I've always said that no one cares about precedent and norms, but you generally have the vice president across, the secretary of defense and state to either side. There is a degree of precedent at the table.
So if he's at the table, how many seats away is he from the president?
2.
So there's defense and
there's
state.
At least one person between him and the president.
Okay, and will he be?
I will say this just so everyone understands, because I appreciate the way we're having this discussion this morning. But I posted this on both Instagram and social media. Staff attends cabinet meetings. This is not abnormal. Press attends cabinet meetings, not the whole thing, but like this hysteria by CNN and everyone else about Elon Musk attending. I attended them. I have photos
but you sat
of them.
But you sat along the wall.
You're there with the notepad.
You sat along the wall and you didn't speak.
True.
Sean.
True.
So that's the question. That's why I'm asking.
I know, but I'm saying that
if he sits
that's why
along
our
the wall,
conversation's different.
If he sits along the wall and doesn't speak, it's perfectly normal.
Oh, no. He'll, whether he sits by the wall or not, and that's why I'm saying there's a difference. I sat on the other side of the president, right, with other staffers, but behind him are the national security advisors. So very serious people. It's not like just so Mike Walls will probably sit over the president's shoulder, right? It's still a very significant place. That's why I'm saying he could easily sit to the right or the left behind him.
Right.
Then the president will call on him, no question about it, because he's going to want to.
He'll call on him. Which rank will he be? The first to speak after Vance or the president? Second, third?
My guess, if I had to think about today, I will say that the president wants to mention the Zelensky deal and the visit and take credit for that, rightly so, by the way. And then I think he may say, we're obviously significant cuts. We're making America great. Elon, do you want to say a few things?
So will someone else speak before him about Zelensky, like Rubio or?
I don't. I think right now it's going to be Trump and then Elon. I mean, that's frankly, if you think about
Yeah.
what's the order of
Yeah.
what's in view, that to me is we're
Okay.
trying to budget. Hey, Elon, how much have we saved?
Right.
I
All
would
right.
want to highlight
Save
that.
the videotape. Don't burn it because we'll be showing this tomorrow. Sean, what will the visit Friday look like? Will there be a ceremony? Will they speak? Will Zelensky do an interview with Fox or two-way? What do you think Friday looks like?
We're locking him down right now for Monday morning. I
Yeah.
think it's an Oval Office ceremony. Trump says, I'm great deal. This is awesome.
I'm sorry, stop you there. If it's a beautiful day, don't you think it'll be outside?
Friday's
because
going
they're
to
paving the
today's
rose
66. Today's you know what? Actually, you're right. The more I think about it, if they did midday, it'll be in the high 50s.
Because Trump knows that historic White House ceremonies like this are usually outside.
Yeah.
Will there be a lot of invited guests?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely.
So it's big. It's like a big
In fact,
event.
now I may actually, I'm going to go. I will.
Yeah. All right, you be our correspondent there. And will Trump give a speech and Zelensky give a speech? Like, just walk through what you think the run of show will be.
If I had to, if I first of all, I will say this: just overall, the digital and production teams deserve a ton of credit how they're staging it. Obviously, the president is the best producer of his own stuff, but if you look at the products they're putting out and how his events have been staged,
Top notch.
That being said, if I stage this, I'd have them two come out of the Oval Office, go to those in the Rose Garden. I mean, outside the Rose Garden, two podiums. Treat it like a state visit. You make statements. He talks about what the U.S. got, and then potentially takes a couple questions. But I would treat it like a normal state visit.
Dan.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they make this like a big deal. It'll end the week. It'll dominate the news coverage on Friday night. I think the big issue, though, is we don't really know the details of what are in this. There's some reports that kind of Ukraine got some stuff, like it's not as bad as it initially was feared. America's not getting the 500 billion in minerals. And the reason I bring this up is Trump will want to claim victory and be the kind of conquering hero. Like, I got Zelensky here. We are getting something. We're getting repaid. If that's not the reality, like, does Zelensky just kind of shut up because all he cares about is what's signed on paper and let Trump kind of go run his mouth? Or does that get uncomfortable where Zelensky feels like, he needs to kind of like Macron put his hand on his arm and say, not really. So we'll see.
Oh, he has to, Dan, because here's the deal. My guess, if I had, like, we got some rare earth minerals, whatever the number is, frankly, right. I think the idea that we are now actually getting something in return for what we do is good for our country. But I think that Zelensky's learned his lesson. And he's also watched Macron, to your point, Dan, that he's going to say, okay, the last time I kicked dirt in him, but here's why. This is why I think it matters. My guess is that we have committed advisors, not boots on the ground, that we have advisors going in. We'll continue some kind of aid on the military front. And that Zelensky knows if I kick dirt in his face or try to say it's not as bad, then Trump just says, yeah, and we'll see what the future holds, kind of thing. Like, and so Zelensky
totally agree.
Fall apart.
Totally agree. Trump's going to be nicer to Zelensky than he's been behind his back. And Zelensky's going to be super nice.
But to your point, Mark, we see this all the time. Like Trump, whether it's 2016 and how we talked about all the other candidates, or DeSantis during the primary this time. And then once it's over, and I've told this to people, Donald Trump has said to me, like, rip my head off, and then come and been like, hey, by the way, I heard you're having a bad day. What can I do to help? Like, he can turn so quickly
on a dime.
And I've never seen anyone compartmentalize like he can. Like
Bill Clinton.
I was just going to say the same way.
Okay,
just like Clinton. Just like Clinton.
Clinton, I don't have as much experience with, but
it's the exact same thing.
I would say that he's, so he can go. Everyone kind of looks around and goes, "How could he turn from going like this to this?" And that's just how he operates.
Him. Exactly. All right. So this issue of the White House announcing yesterday the changes in the way the press pool will work. There's so many sub issues here. Some of these things are only of interest, or should only be of interest, to people in the profession. But there really are big issues here about First Amendment, about how presidents get covered, about control, and it's all under the shadow of the press's failure to object to many things that happened in the previous administration that involved denial of press access, limiting of press access. There were no concern about the First Amendment or about access to the White House when there was a Democratic president on the part of the White House Correspondents Association or on behalf on the press at large, the liberal press at large. And so it's a little bit harder for the press to win this fight because they don't have a ton of legs to stand on because of their conduct over the previous 4 years. At the same time, the White House is right that in the age in which we're living, there shouldn't be a monopoly of a few organizations who happen to be in the main liberally biased to access the White House. So these are very complicated things. So I want to bring up some artifacts. And Sean, I'd love for you to explain them to people, explain who the people are involved, what the significance is. First, let's bring up 103, please. This is the president's daily schedule. It gets released to the media every day, sometimes the night before, sometimes morning of. And it includes at the very top who's in the pool. Okay. So Sean, what stands out for you here in the list of who's in the pool today?
Well, Axios is the print. They're not normally in the pool. And I can't, hold on. I'm trying to read the new media guys. There's something.
The Blaze is the new media, and there's a secondary TV correspondent and crew, Newsmax, in addition to ABC.
So just so everyone understands, you look at this here right now. Okay. So there are multiple segments of the media: wires, photographers, TV, print, radio. And normally what happens is within each of those categories, the White House Correspondents Associations, you have to be a member of them, and they have very strict guidelines how you can join. You can actually go to the WHCA website, and it'll say how you can be a member. Like I actually, after I left, when I joined Newsmax, I wanted to join them, and they rejected my membership. Okay, because so you can't be a show host. You have to prove all that. I mean, like they get to determine the criteria. And if you're not, doesn't meet their criteria and join the WHCA, you can't be eligible to be in the pool. Okay. So of the print, for example, they'll say the Washington Post, the New York Times, okay, et cetera. They then among themselves say on Monday, the Washington Post will cover President Trump. On Tuesday, right? And so same thing with the wires, Reuters, except all of the wires are included right now, by the way. That's a dirty little secret of the wires. On TV, you've got NBC, ABC, Fox, et cetera, and they rotate every day who covers the president. The idea is that person goes in on behalf of that element. So I'm the TV reporter. Even though I work for Fox, I film it, and everybody gets access to that film, right? To that imagery. Same thing with the photos, et cetera. So what the White House did yesterday, if you'll put that back up, is they said, great, we'll let another news organization come in this case, it was Newsmax. So now there's two poolers. On the new media, they're letting the Blaze come in and cover this. So this is where the hysteria is kind of ridiculous. They're additive and saying you don't have to be part of the pool. Let me give you my one historical example that was interesting. When I worked for the House Republican Conference back in 2006 or 7, we have this annual retreat every year. We talked about this a few weeks back when they went down to Doral. And I called the White House because I was working for Deborah Price at the time from Ohio. And I said, hey, guys, we have the Columbus Dispatch and Roll Call, which is one of the really inside baseball Capitol Hill newspapers. Dan knows that. Obviously, Mark does too. But and I said, hey, they really want to come hear President Bush's remarks. And the White House said, we can't. The WHCA won't allow us to add people to the pool. And I said, why do you care? More reporters, they should. And the answer is they don't want you. Right? The WHC wants to control what you read, see, and hear. And so the idea that adding more media is something that they're opposing, to me, really tells you what their motives are. And the idea that they want to be restrictive as to who can get in the Oval, who can fly on the plane, tells you everything you need to know about the White House Correspondents Association.
Okay, so if just a point, and then Dan, I want you to weigh in on what Sean said, and then I want to show Sean a couple more artifacts, and you, but Sean first. Sean, if you and I went to the White House today in time for the cabinet meeting, and we found someone we knew in the press operation or senior staff, and we said, hey, could we come into the Oval and be part of into the cabinet room and be part of that meeting, they'd probably let us in. And if we were in there and Donald Trump didn't want to take questions from the people in the pool, he could say, Sean, question, Mark, question, right? They're changing the rules. You're right. Contrary to the initial take on this, they're not kicking the legacy media out of the pool. They're expanding it. So far, that could change. But Trump wants to take questions from who he wants to take questions from. Sometimes that does include legacy media. He likes taking questions from David Sanger. But they are exercising control and taking control away from the Correspondents Association. They're determining who's in the pool now, not the reporters and the organizations. Dan.
I think it's great. I mean, first off, I actually think that to a large extent, 99% of America does not care. I think most Americans no longer get their news from a lot of these organizations. I mean, that's just the reality. They get it from social media. They get it from friends. They get snippets on, TikTok. I look, the more people that are involved in covering the White House, the better. And I get it. There's a sense that the legacy media, is a more impartial umpire. I don't necessarily think that's always true, but that list you showed, NPR, Newsmax, it's the spectrum. Now, if in a year it is simply Newsmax, Fox News, and I don't know, some podcaster, okay, maybe they'll be.
Dan, remember, the other thing is there's two things about who gets in and what they do. So as I said, the idea is you stand there, whether you're Newsmax or NBC, record the event and then share that with everybody.
Distribute.
Right. Yeah. So this is about who's covering what. One of the things when I was press secretary, I brought in Skype questions. So I would have reporters that could not, and I brought in reporters from local television affiliates and newspapers, and yes, talk show hosts, admittedly, because I wanted to, who could ask a question that normally couldn't make it into the briefing room, and the press in the room went nuts. Because again, it's all about them controlling, right? So when COVID happened and they cut the number of seats in the briefing room that's normally 49 people can sit, and then obviously you can pile along the sides, they went down to, I think it was every other seat. So if you got down to 12 or 14, and they would only allow you to be part of that pool if you were part of the WHCA. So in other words, no one else can come in and cover it if it's not for them. Right. And that they want to restrict it. I think what Caroline's doing is fantastic. I love how they're doing this. And I love the idea that other voices can get in there and see it. And frankly, it's good for the democracy. It's good for the press, because if I say, wow, none of you guys saw that instance occurred over there, and I'm sharing it because NBC doesn't want to highlight something or whatever, I think that's healthy and that's good.
Right. All right. Raise your hand if you want in the conversation. If these decisions are being made for more access and diversity, great. If they're being made to punish content decisions by news organizations, not good. Put up 102, please.
Mark,
so here's,
sorry.
Okay, put up 102. You can keep talking.
I was just going to say, though, as they put it up, okay, they're punishing the AP. Presidents have punished news organizations in different ways. Usually it's more subtle. Usually it's not quite the sledgehammer to your face.
Right.
This is going on forever.
100%. Great point. 100%. Yeah. Sean, who are Peter Baker and Taylor Buttigieg, and what do you make of this exchange on X?
So Peter Baker is he's a long time New York Times correspondent, written several books. Correct me if I'm wrong. His wife, Susan Glazier, right? And so
Glasser writes for the New Yorker.
Yeah, from the New Yorker. So they've long time DC. He was as he says in that tweet, he was a former Russia correspondent, been around forever. Taylor Buttigieg is the deputy chief of staff that oversees communications, public liaison, presidential personnel. So he actually occupies my old office in the White House in the upper press area. So he oversees.
Is Peter Baker considered a resistance member of the media?
He would not be on my list of people that I think would be. I would put him on the anti-Trump list 100%.
Okay, so explain why this tweet X exchange is significant if you think it is.
So you have Peter Baker basically saying, again, as we've just discussed, we have Caroline Leavitt in the White House expanded media access, allowing more people to come in. That list that you showed is bigger than it was the day before, not smaller, not more restrictive. So Peter Baker saying, when I was in Russia,
put the tweet back up, please. Sorry, go ahead.
So he's look. I mean, when I was in Russia and I saw Putin do the following, he's trying to make it seem dictatorship-esque, right? So having served in Moscow as a Moscow correspondent in the early days of Putin regime, this reminds me of how the Kremlin took over its own press pool and made sure that only certain, I can't say, this is where my screen is a little, certain journalists were given access, which is, again, a lie. That's not what they grew that list, allowed more people in. The New York Times is still on that list, right?
And do you think?
So this is 100% lie, and Taylor is rightfully calling himself out.
Right.
And by the way, this comes on the heels. I just want to say this because it's not on the list, but Jake Tapper from CNN announced a new book that they're peddling as Inside Biden's Decline. So CNN, who covered it up for 40 years, is now going to make money off of uncovering Biden's decline. This is the same double like Peter Baker making this issue about Putin and the regime at the Kremlin is a complete fabrication, misinformation, and a lie as to what's actually happening.
Right. So Team Trump has never been shy about calling out individual reporters or put the tweet back up, please, or being negative towards reporters. Donald Trump himself, but people work for him. I do think it's kind of extraordinary. Peter Baker, whatever else you think of him, is one of the senior members of the White House press corps, working for a very respected organization, which has been hostile to Donald Trump. And Taylor refers to Peter Baker here as a tired, hyperbolic loser. Dan, is that something you think is, again, just par for the course, or do you think that crosses some new fantastic line?
No, I think this exchange kind of highlights everything about today, the way the media operates, which is when Trump and Trump officials, we've talked about kind of this time versus last time, engage online, or it is a harsh kind of slashing in your face, like go to the JD Vance Ro Khanna exchange, right? It is kind of using that really direct language, making it like kind of punch you in the face with really harsh words. That's just how they operate. Like, I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just their style. It's the alpha on the playground.
Put it back up, please. Sean, hold
on. But I do want to say this. The flip side, because he's not the only one about this, is like the, Putin-esque, is absurd. If all of a sudden the US government starts to control X and journalists start falling out of windows, then we're going towards Russia. But simply saying, we don't like the way you behave, so we're going to put you in the penalty box, which again has been happening for 100 years in administrations. Just once again, this administration kind of does out loud what is often done behind closed doors. Then that is different. But again, most people don't even read the New York Times anymore. It's like Kamala Harris focused on 60 Minutes. Like the world is other places.
Let me just real quick to your point. Peter Baker has 500,000 followers on X. So even regardless of the New York Times and how many people it has, he has 554,000 people follow him on X around the world, I'm sure. He puts out a statement saying what the White House is doing is analogous to what the Kremlin did under Putin to the media. And the Trump administration calls him out for it, and they're the bad guy. I'm sorry. Like, Peter Baker is lying. He's gaslighting the American people and spreading false information. Democracy dies in darkness and all that other BS. And for Taylor Budowich to call him out to his audience, to explain to people that's not true, is the exact right thing to do. It's Peter Baker that's spreading misinformation and lying.
So I don't read the chat, but sometimes I glance at it. I saw somebody say, Dan is a closet Republican. No, Dan is just, the whole point of this platform is to be honest and direct and to share thoughts and ideas. All three of us have the same view of Peter's tweet. It's resistance, and it is so hyperbolic, as Taylor said. So I don't mind Taylor saying hyperbolic. I think calling him a loser is probably ridiculous. to my ear, it's just not the right thing to do.
But wait. So fair enough. But is it okay for Peter to refer to the White House as
no? We've all three of us have condemned that. But Sean, if Taylor had asked you in advance, hey Sean, I'm thinking of calling Peter a tired, hyperbolic loser, would you have signed off on all three words?
Yes, is the answer. 100%.
Well, because it's a boss of one, and the boss.
No, because I'm tired. Listen, here's why. If you had asked me this question, Mark, 8 years ago, I probably would have said, well, we should probably take it down a notch and call Peter and tell him this is insane. I'm tired of us on the right always being the ones that have to say, you guys should take it down a notch and you guys should be I'm like, so I'm at the point now where, you know what? We have sat back for long enough that now there is a time that he's not calling on and he's calling him out. And so I'm fine.
Yeah. So here's what I would say to that. Okay. For those of you who hear what Sean just said and say outrageous MAGA, coarsening our culture, You have to understand, you can disagree with Sean's point of view on this, but you have to understand it's not just the last 4 years or the last 8 years. It is decades of the liberal media treating Republicans unfairly and Republicans feeling like their candidate was almost sent to prison, was almost killed, and they're just not going to put up with it anymore. And you're seeing that as Dan said, they're doing things that are mostly done, but they're saying them aloud, right? In past administrations, they'd call a New York Times reporter and they'd say, "You're a tired, hyperbolic loser, and don't think we're going to give you any exclusives anytime soon." Instead, Trump administration's putting it online. So you can disagree with Sean and Taylor, but you have to understand, if you want to understand America, where they're coming from. And where they're coming from, as Sean well said, is they're done with playing on an unlevel playing field. They're done having everyone who comes in on the pool or everyone on the Meet the Press roundtable being someone hostile to Donald Trump and Donald Trump supporters. They're just done with it.
I also think if Taylor wrote, "Peter, you're overreacting, and that is not, it is not that bad," that's a boring tweet.
Yeah,
Trump loves this. Trump
of course.
loves this.
Take the tweet down now, please. Last question, because we're a little over. Literally just a yes/no answer for now. We'll come back to this topic. Dan, should we take Gavin Newsom seriously as a potential front runner for the presidential nomination in 2028? He's starting a new podcast on politics where he says he's going to talk, amongst other things, to MAGA people. Yes or no? Should we be taking him seriously as a potential candidate?
To take him seriously because I think he's going to run. No, he's definitely not a front runner.
Okay, Sean?
He's a runner.
He's a runner. All right. I'm
curious. As a runner, that's insulting.
I'm curious why you don't. I'm curious why you don't think he's a front runner. But we have no time for that because we got to get folks in. I'll bring you in. If you come in, please unmute. Raise. Tell us where you are and what's on your mind. And we start with Jack O'Lantern. Jack Desmond, welcome in. You got to unmute first. You got to unmute, Jack. One more time. Hit the unmute notification there. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Welcome in.
Morning. I'm in San Antonio.
Yes, sir.
I kind of find it interesting, all of the last night and today, talking about the media, because the kind of people that watch two-way, not to mention, so many people that are engaged in the political activities. This is, they're really getting in kind of a state of high dudgeon about all of this, because I think most of the country, they don't much care about who is.
They do not. And I tried to make that clear in the intro to the topic, but there are First Amendment issues here and there are accountability issues here. If the only reporters who question Donald Trump are reporters who like him and are favorable to him, we're not going to get the same level of scrutiny and accountability that's required. We're not at that point. But if you care about accountability for your president, you should care about this. So I agree that not everybody does, although I will tell you, in my sampling of opinion of people on this platform, people love talking about the press. So it's an interesting topic to people, even if they're not directly affected. But I'll say again, these issues of transparency, access, accountability, they're hugely important for our democracy. And even if not everybody cares about them or is directly affected. Sorry to interrupt. What more would you like to say or ask, sir?
Well, I think the big thing here, is this has done nothing but expand it. People are saying this is is restricting speech. It's nonsense. If anything, the status quo before.
Well, Jack, there's one exception to what you said, which is the Associated Press. And they've been excluded, although I think this White House move, as Mark Caputo pointed out last night, this move it seems to be intended in part to obscure what's at issue in the Associated Press's legal action, which is they were not expanded. They weren't contracted out, even though they supply news and photos to people around the world. And they were targeted, it seems quite clear, because of their content dispute with the White House. And any citizen should be concerned about that, whether it's done by a Democratic administration or Republican. They're not in charge of saying your ability to do your job and cover the White House, not just for themselves, but for organizations around the world, can't be predicated on their content. It just can't be. That's antithetical to our democracy and
just to be
accountability.
Clear, though, that if you weren't right now, if the morning meeting had a Washington correspondent and wanted to be eligible to go into the pool, under the current rules, the WHCA would not allow them. Okay, so that's restrictive. I think the idea
that's not necessarily based on content. I'm just as outraged. Well,
Well,
no, they may
but-
not
but
be. It may be
just to-
based on size or some standards about who's admitted. When the New York Post was excluded by the Biden administration, I was one of the few reporters who denounced it, but most didn't. So
Right.
there's hypocrisy here. But that's just as bad as this. You cannot let the government say coverage access is based on how you cover us, based on the content of how you cover. You just can't. You just can't do it.
Okay, just to be clear, so everyone understands this though. The AP has their press credentials. They're in the briefing every day. They're at the White House. There is a big difference. The First Amendment gives you the right to write, say, and do anything that you think without interference from the government. They are able to do that. But if you work at, let's just say when I was at any other, DOD or USTR or whatever, the idea of who to invite up to, whether it's the ambassador or the secretary's office is 100% within the purview of the press office.
100%.
It's just that the White House has this unique pool thing going on that no one else does. So
Right.
I would make decisions all the time about what reporters would be, given
Right. So-
access for interviews.
Of course, but there's a fundamental difference here. And I saw in the chat, I don't read the chat, but I glance at it. The AP has been liberally biased. Not as liberally biased as the Washington Post, but they've been liberally biased. And that's part of the calculation here. But I will say, Sean, the AP is not a normal organization, right?
Correct.
They are in the pool
Publish a
and the
style book
wires.
that everybody has to abide by.
They do, but they also distribute information to organizations around the world. So excluding them,
But also that's the
excluding
problem,
them-
Mark. That's the exact problem.
But
Is that when one
it can't
organization
be
with bias
based-
is what everybody
it can't-
sees, reads, and
it
hears
can't
around
be
the
based.
world.
It can't be based. I agree that that's a problem, and they should address that through other means, which they are. But they cannot set the precedent of excluding them based on their content. Because there's content that the presidents don't like about all sorts of people, whether it's ideological bias or carelessness or prejudice, whatever it is.
Jack, I know-
You cannot exclude them. You cannot exclude them for this. You just
All
can't.
right, we have a different view on this because I don't think they're being excluded. I think you get to choose who goes into your office or not.
But that's
Secondly,
the
to
thing, at
Jack,
the end
They
of
were
the
excluded.
day, you're
They were
getting
the AP, and they
content.
were excluded. And they were excluded
Yeah.
from a press conference, not just the Oval Office.
But hold on a
Oh.
sec. That press conference is broadcast on television, X,
That's right.
everywhere. You get the content. To me,
You-
where
you
there's
don't.
a problem.
It's the credibility of being able to ask questions. It's
but
an important function.
But
Dan,
should they
it's an
just-
important
But hold on a
function.
sec. 99% of the time they don't answer the questions. And it's but look, to me,
an
where this has become a
important
problem is
function.
if
but here's
I'm
the-
more worried that Kash Patel is going to show up at journalists' houses and say,
Oh.
you wrote that. No, I know, Sean, I don't really worry about that. But my point is, like, that's where you're crossing a line.
So here's
as
what I would
opposed to,
say.
like,
I
to
mean,
me, this.
I know, Jack, and I'm sure you're loving this, but part of I think the beauty of this is that we are a platform that brings you inside like no one else can or does. And that's the beauty of this. And so I think what I love about the audience we have here is that people are much more interested in about how the sausage is made. And what I will tell you is two things. Number one, it's the AP, it's sort of like history has caught up with them. And this is, I get, Mark and I can disagree, but the point is they have held a view for the longest time and been unbelievably elitist and arrogant about how they've covered stuff. And it's now the chickens are coming home to roost. The second thing I would just point out about this whole situation, both in terms of the WHCA, the White House Correspondents Association, and the AP, is personalities matter. Right. And part of the problem, I was over there at the White House yesterday talking to a lot of folks about this. Eugene Daniels, who's the head of the White House Correspondents Association right now, the president, has been unbelievably leftist in his coverage, both during Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's administration.
It's insane. He's the head of the Correspondents Association.
Right.
It's
and so
insane.
but he has done, and the same thing with Julie Pace at the AP, is that the people who are leading these organizations at this time have a lack of credibility when it comes to defending their position because of their bias that they've held for, years, if not decades. And it's
Totally agree. Totally agree. Jack,
wanna
thanks
hear
for
from
coming in,
Gene.
Jack. Jack, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. Great of you to tee us up like that. All right, ladies, only one of you can be Gene Johnson.
That'd
I'm
be
a-
me.
That'd be you. Who'd you bring with you,
And I'm her
Gene?
twin sister. Just my
Is
twin
that true?
sister.
Welcome,
Nice.
ladies. What's your name?
Julia.
June and Julia. Thank you both for joining. Like J names here. My son's name is James. Tell us first about where you are and about your history with Two Way.
Okay, I'm in Northern California, outside of San Francisco. I've been on Two Way since June. And I've watched
You're-
probably every single episode morning and
You're an
evening.
OG.
You're like a finder, a founder.
I came across and I'm like, got fascinated. Thank you
all
guys
right.
so much.
All right.
for
Thank you.
bringing this.
Sis, do you live there too? And are you
No,
newer
I
to the
live in
platform?
Memphis, Tennessee. So, California, Tennessee.
Yeah. You have better
Lots
barbecue.
of
She has
family
better
conversations.
avocados.
Yeah, so she got me on like a month later. You got to watch
Okay.
this. This is great. So we've been
We'll
watching.
give you OG
together.
status too.
All right, ladies,
Yes.
couldn't be happier to have you here. Do you have a shared question or topic you want to raise, or we each have something on your minds?
Yeah,
Yes.
we do. It's a two-part question, and we're kind of changing the subject. We're going to the
All good.
judicial branch, judicial,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
all of the different cases being brought. So first of all, I was asking if there is anywhere I can find like a synopsis. There's so many of them, and keeping track of where they're at, where they were brought, who's the judge on the case, and where
Yeah.
they in the process to get to
It's
probably the Supreme Court, because none of these lower judges want to like stop them.
yeah, that is a great question.
great
Somebody
question.
should be doing that. It's law. What's that law blog called? SCOTUS blog.
SCOTUS blog, right?
Can somebody get, while we're talking, somebody
Oh,
on
Benjamin,
our team
whatever that's called.
go
Oh, no,
to-
he's
go
got
to-
some.
go
He's
to-
got
go
some
to-
issues now.
Go to SCOTUS blog. Yeah, he's yeah, it won't be him. It's a great question, and my friend Josh Gerstein, who covers these kind of things for Politico, he probably has it, although I don't know that he's posted it. But let us look.
SCOTUSblog.com has a lot.
Yeah. But
Okay,
do
that'd
they
be
have like
great.
a
That'd be great.
systematic chart on there?
Oh,
Paul?
that'd be great.
No, it's
Paul-
just
Yes.
stories, but it's
No,
case
no.
previews. It's actually,
But
I mean,
but you're right. Somebody should have a spreadsheet that says,
Yes.
as you said, judge, status of the case, previous rulings, next steps. It should
Yes.
absolutely
Exactly.
exist because we live in the information age.
so
But
if you go to SCOTUS blog and you go to the top left, again, I'm doing this on the fly, but it has the case, Williams v. Reed. Here's the decision. Here's the, so it's.
Well,
It's
there's
actually-
two things. There's lawsuits, and then there's the internal objections that are going up through, like within the channels before they hop
Yeah,
out of government into
all
the
right,
legal.
here we
And
go.
those are like 2,000 a day.
Here we go, ladies. JustSecurity.org. Thank you, Aisha. Just Security came from one of you.
What
JustSecurity.org.
is it again? Just security.
JustSecurity.org.
Okay, .org. All right.
I'm
The
told
other
it's there. I
question.
haven't looked.
to the
Yes,
two-part.
ma'am. Yes,
So,
ma'am.
we have checks on our government. My question is, where are the checks on the judicial branch? Meaning, I know, ultimately the Supreme Court is the ultimate, ruler.
Yeah.
But all the lower courts.
Yeah.
So, we have, especially now, it happens on both sides. So, regardless, so executive doesn't
So
order.
You're
lawsuits.
absolutely right. It's the checks are not symmetrical. So here are three checks on the judicial branch. First of all, there are multiple layers, right? In the federal courts, there's district court of appeals and Supreme Court. So if
Right.
one judge or even a group of judges, if the Court of Appeals makes a mistake, you'd hope that the Supreme Court would be a check on bad decisions. Two is the legislative branch can add new judges. They can defund the courts. They can take extreme measures. They can impeach, right? They can
They
do
never
that.
do. But they don't.
They have
Occasionally, but it's
3 times.
also a threat, and they do change the number of judges on a particular circuit, and of course they
Okay.
confirm judges, right? Presidents nominate judicial candidates, but the confirmation process, in theory, if they're doing their jobs, they're not going to put people on the courts who are going to be out of control. Of course, as you well know, there's a dispute about activist judges on both sides because the conservatives pretend they don't like activist judges, except they do like activist judges when they're activists for a result oriented on the conservative side. And then lastly,
Yeah.
I think the executive, besides being able to nominate the candidates for the judicial branch, which again is a check, they can work around judicial decisions. Now, I don't like when they do it in a way that's unconstitutional or that violates the spirit or the letter of a decision. But they can see a decision and say, okay, let's get some legislation that overrides this. If it's a constitutional issue, they can't. If the Supreme Court says this is inconsistent with some provision of the Constitution, but there can be judicial decisions that some combination of legislation or executive orders can be a little bit of a remedial response. Dan, any thoughts beyond what I said?
Yeah, look, Democrats have been frustrated about judicial accountability for years. A couple of times they've threatened to try to expand the court, and just that has always been a loser. It is politically unpopular. to try to kind of add more judges from your side to get the results you want. The other thing is, and it hasn't been talked about much in the hurricane of the last 6 weeks, on our side, there is kind of outrage over Clarence Thomas having accepted all of these gifts that he forgot to disclose, that the executive and congressional branch ought to pass ethics reforms that require justices to disclose more. And it has been conservative justices that have said, back off, stay out of us. Only we get to decide what we should or should not disclose. I'd love it if conservatives would join in and say there should be more accountability, because some of the stuff that's come out, and I can't fathom it was that they forgot to disclose it. They got caught. That's what happened.
Sean.
I agree generally. I mean, there are checks, and that's how the system was developed. So, I mean, to give the executive and the legislative branch some check on this, I get it's may not be as robust as the other branches in terms of accountability, but that's part of what the founders, I think, were looking for.
Ladies, Jean, you got your sister on board, but what else are you doing to build the audience of Two-Way?
I'm trying to get my children on board. They're very different in their viewpoints than I am. So to see both sides, you got to see both sides, guys, get on. So, and my friends, and if this goes on, we were going to send this to a bunch of our friends to say, get on Two-Way.
All right, well, you're on. Thank you both for joining. We hope you'll come back both together and separately. Enjoy your visit together.
That was awesome, guys.
Send us all the barbecue and avocados you wish.
Okay.
Thank you. Really enjoyed having you on. We like having spouses on. Jane, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind, please.
Hi. It's been a long time. I'm unoriginal. I've been watching a long time. Really quick question, because this shocked me back before all this, but when Amber Ruffin was asked to be the White House Correspondents' Dinner and said, "Oh, I don't want Trump to be that," I just thought that was so disrespectful. And I know that's not the whole reason, but I guess it's just part of the symptom.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that you're making, right? So just so everyone understands this, every year the Correspondents' Dinner has their little ditty in April. And the president, I'm sure in concurrence with the board of the Correspondents Association, chooses the comedian or the entertainer. They actually had a historian a few years ago. And Eugene Daniels of Politico, who's the current president, chose a very left-wing Trump-hating comedian who, after being chosen, went on MSNBC and some other things and was asked, "Do you want President Trump to attend?" And she said, "No. You know, he's a horrible person, blah, blah, blah." I think regardless of her views, which she obviously has a right to do, the idea that the president of the Correspondents Association would choose someone
and the board would approve.
Yeah, and as you know, in concurrence with the board, somebody who is openly hostile to the president, and then, by the way, turn around from Eugene's standpoint and say, "I extended an invitation to him." I mean, who in their right mind? Of all the examples of insane bias and a lack of awareness about this moment in American history, this one for me is right at the top, because it's binary. It's not ambiguous. She hates Donald Trump.
She said it. She said, "I don't want to be there."
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't want him to go.
He wasn't going to go anyway, I'm pretty sure. But certainly now he's not going to go, and he shouldn't go. It's ridiculous. And that dinner has had its share of PR issues over the years. Right. There's a way for that dinner to be a good thing.
I will tell you this, Mark,
someone hostile to the president.
I think at some point, especially because of how this election has turned out, and you know the shift in corporate media, I think in some ways he was hoping to go. And I just think that where the WHCA screwed up is that they had a chance to show that there was a willing partner in this. To again, you can be funny. I mean, you know, Saturday Night Live had their 50th anniversary week ago, and now it's, you know, there was a time when we could be funny about politics and not mean. And the problem is that they doubled down on mean, and that was stupid.
Well, and I would not discount that Trump's rise to fame. You know, don't forget, it was the White House Correspondents' Dinner when Trump was riding the birther movement, and was sitting in the audience, and Obama savaged him with mocking humor, and the whole room laughed at Trump and wrote stories mocking Trump, how small he was. And I'm sure, as a guy who never forgets, that he has never forgotten how he was treated. I know it was Obama who did who was joking around, but that room, it's my understanding, I was not there, did not help their cause. Obviously, they didn't know what he would go on to become, but there's no love lost.
Yeah. I saw somebody put in the chat, Shane Gillis should be invited. Good choice. This is an unhumble brag. I lucked into seeing him last night try out his Saturday Night Live monologue.
How was it?
It was excellent. I recommend you tune in Saturday night. It was excellent. But my point is, he made jokes both about Donald Trump and Joe Biden, both of which were very funny, but not like super negative, not like personal, just kind of,
Right.
spoof, satire, whatever you want to call it. And that's what they should have done. They should have had an equal opportunity comedian who does make political jokes, but about both parties. It's just so fundamental. It's like almost ridiculous that we would have to point it out. Jane, did you have
that's
another?
how Jay Leno got the job over David Letterman?
Yep. Uh-huh.
Was that
What,
Jay
he was
Leno
just
traveled
funnier?
around? He
No,
traveled
because
around
he
the
was more
country and
equal
met with all the
opportunity.
affiliates, and
yeah.
he would make jokes about both parties. And
Yeah.
Letterman was always making jokes against Reagan and against the right. And Leno went to the executives at NBC and had the affiliates reach out to say he was more appealing to our viewers because he kind of rips both sides.
Republicans watch local news too. Jane, did you have another question?
I see. This is why I love the platform. I learned so much that I didn't expect to know today. All right,
Jane, thank you for coming on.
Thank y'all. This platform has been great, so I appreciate all of y'all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're looking forward to the cabinet meeting. I'm looking forward to seeing. I didn't make my predictions because I really don't know. But if I have forced to say, I would say he's going to be sitting next to the president and he'll be called on first.
Anyway, does somebody ask?
I will not. The funny thing is, I will not dispute. I think that's a 55. Like, I know what I hope happens, but I don't.
Yeah, I think it's a bad idea, but I think that's what's going to happen. Dan, what were you going to say?
Here's my question:
Does somebody ask a question? Does somebody ask a question if he speaks and is at the table about there are certain cabinet secretaries here who instructed their staffs to not, so nobody tries to stir the pot.
There's too many other important things to ask about, I think.
Since we're going to talk about important things, does Elon wear a hat or a tie, or does he still wear the jacket and the t-shirt?
He is dressed in character.
In sunglasses.
Dressed in character.
I think no hat. I don't know.
Is X with him?
No.
We didn't talk about the fact that yesterday he attacked the president's preferred reconciliation package on X.
Unbelievable. It was unbelievable.
That slid by. Sean, what do you have coming up at 6 tonight?
So Erica Donalds, Byron Donalds' wife, will be on the show, and which, I guess there's some questions to ask about not just education, which he's a champion of, but the status of that race down in Florida.
Yeah.
And
he announced last night on Hannity.
Right, but their relationship with the DeSantis, where that stands. And then we've got Selena Zito coming on as well, who has done some fabulous reporting on not just Pennsylvania, where her is unbelievable, but also she just did a dispatch from Ohio in the race there between Vivek Ramaswamy and Lieutenant Governor Halstead.
Yeah. She also did a joint interview with Fetterman and McCormick, the two Pennsylvania senators. One of the few states that have a senator from each party, and they are collaborating on stuff for the state and on some national issues. So that's
Mark, real quick. So people are asking. And I know that you guys have been helpful facilitating this, but I did a video on a woman named Lindy Lee. And here's a cool thing. Next week, she is actually going to come on the show and answer my concerns about her conversion. And then our good friend, our Democratic correspondent there, is going to critique how I did and how she did and tell me. So I've been asked when Lindy Lee's coming on.
Yeah.
We have commitment next Tuesday.
Awesome. I was glad to play a minor role in brokering the peace agreement.
It was a major role.
All right. Tonight, 5 p.m. Eastern time, before Sean's show on Two-Way, Megan back. What episode is this? Episode 3. Megan McCain's Happy Hour. Her guest for the hour, Landon Clements, very familiar to Dan and Sean. She was on Bravo, and she's got a very popular Substack, and she writes about culture and politics. And the chemistry between Landon and Megan, what people are already saying is not since Dan and Sean have two people crackled off the screen. And I believe I'm right that Landon has not done an interview like this, at least not in a while. So tune in 5 o'clock Eastern time. You can go to two-way.tv/Megan to register if you want to be part of the conversation on Two-Way on our platform, and you can watch it on YouTube on the Two-Way YouTube channel, or go to my Substack or my
I'm excited
Twitter
now.
feed
I'm
or
putting it,
Megan's.
I'm going to my DVR.
Yeah, you're gonna want to watch it. You're gonna watch it. I don't like to make guarantees, because in life there are very few things that can be guaranteed. But this will be a very crackling episode, so watch it. And then I'll be on at 6 also for Two-Way tonight. And then the three of us will be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Bring your twins, bring your kids, join in the conversation. Very grateful to everybody who asked questions. And gentlemen, I look forward tomorrow to reviewing the Musk predictions. Have a good day.
That's gonna be fun.
A must watch episode.